Hello, everyone. We're going to move now on to chapter 5 in the book of Esther. We just studied where Haman is very upset with Mordecai because Mordecai will not bow to him. And so he has vowed to kill all the Jews. The king does not know that his wife, Queen Esther, is a Jew. And Mordecai, her cousin, her stepfather, has told her to go to the king and see what she can do by begging for mercy for these people. And so she has that to do. She knows that you can't enter into the king's court without being asked to. And so the king has to hold out his scepter in order for you to be allowed to come in. And if he holds it out to you, you may touch the tip of it and enter into his gates. So she's fasted and asked all the Jews in Shushan to fast with her for 3 days and 3 nights and seek the Lord about this situation. Now in Esther chapter 5 verse 1 it says, "Now it happened on the 3rd day," this is after the fast, "that Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace across from the king's house, while the king sat on his royal throne in the royal house facing the entrance of the house." Well, first thing we find out is she must have looked stunning, because it said she prepared herself. She put on her royal robes. Her robes must have been just awesome, with roped embroidery all over them and just long, beautiful, flowing gowns that she wore, and her crown. And in verse 2 it says, "And so it was." Now the king is sitting there on his throne. "And so it was, when the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, that she found favor in his sight. And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand, and Esther went near and touched the top of the scepter." Now our story is kind of sounding like a love story at this point. So she's dressed in the finest clothing. She looked amazing. I believe she probably spent a lot of time getting herself ready for this meeting that they were about to have. And she's standing in the court when the king lays eyes on her. She's breathtakingly beautiful. You must imagine all the beauty that was around her, because the courts of the palace were beautiful all by themselves. We've already talked about even at his house, and when he had the party, there was tapestry, there was silk hangings, there was beautiful color, royal furnishings, plants, flowers, waterfalls, fountains, marble floors, just to mention a few. And the beauty of the queen herself standing among all of that was just splendor to him. And it had been around 33 days, remember, since Esther had seen the king. And I wonder if maybe he had forgotten how beautiful she was. Who knows? But when he saw her, men have a way of forgetting the good things about a good woman sometimes. So when he saw her, his eyes about popped out of his head, it sounds like. She made his eyes dance. So he was ready to do whatever this beautiful queen wanted him to do. Remember, it's a very touching scene right here. I can't imagine what was probably going on in her head. She was probably relieved, because she could tell that he accepted her. He immediately held out the scepter for her to touch. And so the king said to her, now listen to this. He talks to her so fast she can't even answer one question before he asks the next. In verse 3 he says, "And the king said to her, 'What do you wish, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given to you up to half the kingdom.'" He asked her 2 questions before she could answer, and he offers her half his kingdom. I mean, the guy is just goo-goo-eyed at this point. He's fallen all over himself. He sees that Queen Esther has a problem of some kind, so it seems like he's trying to comfort her before she can even speak to him. And he offers her anything she wants, anything. And this is how she responds, of all things. She says, it says in verse 4, So Esther answered, "If it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come today to the banquet that I have prepared for him." Of all things, she asked them to come to dinner. Her request was very simple. Would you have ever thought that's what she was going to ask for? It was kind of a shock considering all that was going on. So it's funny, because Haman hates the Jews. He has no idea that Esther is a Jew. And when the king hears what she wants, he says, "Bring Haman quickly, that he may do as Esther has said." So he's telling Haman, "You're going to do what Esther says. Come on, quick." So the king and Haman went to the banquet that Esther had prepared. I think that's fascinating that she, unbeknownst to Haman, she had him in the palm of her hand because she had such favor with the king at this point. So at the banquet of wine, the king said to Esther again, he says, what is your petition? It shall be granted to you. What is your request? Up to half the kingdom, it shall be done. Again, he's just drooling on her. He's saying, what is your petition? It shall be granted to you. What is your request? Up to half the kingdom. He's asking her faster than she can answer, and he's offering everything he has to offer to her. And so Esther answered and said, my petition and my request is this. Just like a woman. She's really drawing it out here. She says, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, well, yeah, she had found a lot of favor in the sight of the king. And she says, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, well, he's already told her whatever she wants, then let the king and Haman come to the banquet which I will prepare for them, and tomorrow I will do as the king has said. So here again, she has asked him for favor, and she's pleasing, she's charming, she's liked, she wants approval. I love this part. Esther's acting like a real woman now. The first thing she says to the king is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king. Well, yeah, she made herself look especially beautiful for him, and we all know he has not seen her in over a month. So she found favor with him instantly with her looks alone. It's a woman thing. She goes on to tell the king to come back tomorrow, darling, honey, sweetie pie, and we'll talk over supper, of course. Bye-bye. Come on back tomorrow. I'll have everything ready. I'll be waiting. I can see her long eyelashes blinking and winking at him as he stumbles out the door. So I think she pulled one over on him with her beauty and her charm. I believe her intent was to make him wonder all night about her request. She wanted him so ready to hear her petition and grant it to her that he would do anything. She is stringing him along. Have you ever had someone do that to you? Just call you and say, I'm going to call you later. I got to talk to you about something. Well, you wonder all day long what they want to talk to you about. You're just squirming around. This is what she did to the king. So in verse 9, so Haman went out that day joyful and with a glad heart, just like Haman. He's got the big head again. But when Haman saw Mordecai, he's got the big head because he just came out of a banquet with the queen and the king. So he's thinking he's all that. But he passes by Mordecai, and that he did not stand or tremble before him, and he was filled with indignation again with Mordecai. He leaves this banquet feeling very excited. He sees Mordecai. Mordecai won't bow, and he's mad again. So in verse 10, nevertheless, it says Haman restrained himself, and he went home. And he sent and called for his friends and his wife, Jerish. He kept his anger in check for the moment, and he went home. He calls for his wife and for his friends. Then Haman tells them, he says, I have great riches, the multitude of his children, everything in which the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced above all the officials and servants for the king. And he says, besides, Queen Esther invited no one but me to come in with the king to a banquet that she prepared. And tomorrow I'm again invited to be with her and the king. He's bragging about everything he has. He's bragging about going to this banquet. He says, but yet all of this avails nothing to me as long as I see Mordecai, that Jew sitting at the king's gate. He is letting Mordecai rob his joy. He cannot stand it. I think we've all maybe come across that person, unfortunately, that just maybe has rubbed us the wrong way at some point in our life. And even though everything is going well, we can see this one person. It may even be somebody at your church. And it can ruin everything for us. Well, this is what Haman is dealing with. And of course, that's a whole nother lesson in itself as well. We have to learn how to change ourselves. That person may not ever change, but we have to change ourselves to where we can enjoy our own life. So then his wife Zeresh, he's telling all of them, he's kind of crying in his beer there, telling them what's going on. And his wife Zeresh and all of his friends said to him, hey, let gallows be made 50 cubits high. 50 cubits high is huge. And in the morning suggest to the king that Mordecai be hanged on it. Then we'll go merrily to the king to the banquet. You can do that. And the thing pleased Haman, so he had the gallows made. So his wife and his friends suggest they build a gallows and tell the king that he wants Mordecai hung on it. And he says, then they tell him that then you can go to the king's banquet and be happy. you know, nothing's making you happy because of Mordecai, so build a gallows and let's hang him. Again, I realize that even one of my pictures shows a rope. At this time, the gallows were impalement poles. It was a gruesome, torturous death. Sometimes the victim would be pulled down on this pole, and I'll save some of the details here, but sometimes they would live for hours like that as they just died slowly on this pole. But he wanted it to be very high. That would be almost as long as 4 trucks parked end to end or 8 stories high. The pole was built higher than usual, and the reason was because when someone offended someone or did something very bad, the higher they were, it was kind of like the worse the crime. It was just so everybody in the city could see it. They didn't want anyone to miss it, so the higher the better. The impalement was to be on display. It would make a good-hearted person try to figure out a way to help this person on this pole. It was horrible. And it was Haman's wife who suggested how high to build the pole. High or short, to me, either one is terrible. But they suggested that Haman see the king about this plan in the morning time. Go to the king in the morning. So Haman's wife and friends thought it would be nice for Haman to attend the banquet that evening and have a good time visualizing Mordecai on that impalement pole all day long. The display would be so rewarding for Haman and his family. Mordecai means little, so he may have even been a small man or a short man, but to put a little fellow on such a long pole showed a lot of hatred. I would think that his wife and friends were not very good people. But Haman loved this idea. I imagine Haman slept well that night with the gallows dancing in his head as he thought about poor old Mordecai being impaled on this pole. All right, guys, we're going to go to chapter 6 in our next lesson. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.